An Apollo astronaut just admitted he photographed artificial structures on the moon. Structures that predate humanity by millions of years. For 50 years, Charles Duke kept quiet. He was the 10th man to walk on the lunar surface, a brigadier general, a test pilot with impeccable credentials who performed flawlessly on one of history's most complex missions. But here is the catch. What he saw in the Descartes Highlands in 1972 doesn't match a single word in any NASA report. And the photos he took? They've never been released. This is the testimony NASA hoped would die with him. It didn't. The wall that shouldn't exist, April 1972. The lunar surface. Charles Duke stood 6 kilometers from the lunar module, farther than any human had ventured from their spacecraft. The Descartes Highlands stretched before him, an endless expanse of gray dust and ancient craters. The silence inside his helmet was absolute. No wind, no atmosphere. Just the sound of his own breathing and the faint hum made him stop moving entirely, Geometric, Duke would later describe it. Too regular to be natural. He called out to Mission Commander John Young. "John, you seeing this?" Young's voice crackled through the radio. "Yeah, Charlie, I see it." They drove the rover closer. It wasn't on their planned route, but astronauts had some discretion. With every meter they covered, the shape on the horizon became clearer and more impossible. Duke described what he saw in a 2019 interview, breaking decades of silence. It looked like a wall, or a foundation, angular, made of blocks, covered in dust, but definitely constructed. Maybe 100 meters long, extending into the lunar surface at both ends, as if we were seeing part of something larger. The lunar dust lay undisturbed around it, fine as powder, untouched for eons. The blocks, if that's what they were, cast sharp shadows in the unfiltered sunlight. No erosion from weather, no softening from time. Just clean geometric edges against the gray horizon. Duke raised his camera. The Hasselblad felt heavy in his gloved hands. He began documenting everything. Close-ups of the block surfaces. Context shots showing the scale. Wide angles capturing how the structure disappeared into the lunar soil at both ends. Click, 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 dozens of photos. The most important photographs in human history, taken by a man trained to observe, document, and report. But here is the catch. When they called Houston to report what they were seeing, something strange happened. "We described it clearly," Duke said. "There was a long delay, longer than normal. Then we were told to continue with our planned sample collection." No acknowledgement. No follow-up questions. No request for more photos. Just silence. Then an order to move on. Duke and Young exchanged a look through their visors. They were experienced enough to understand what that silence meant. Houston didn't want them pursuing it, but they already had the photos, and those photos showed something that rewrites everything we think we know about the moon. The structures weren't just artificial, they were ancient. "Eroded," Duke said. "Even though there's no weather on the moon, covered in impact craters, which meant they had been there for a very long time. Millions of years, possibly." He paused in the interview, letting the weight of his words settle. They predated anything humans have built. They predated humans. The silence that lasted 50 years. So why did it take Charles Duke 40 years to tell anyone? To understand the weight of his silence, you need to understand who Charles Duke was. He wasn't a UFO enthusiast looking for attention. He wasn't a conspiracy theorist with something to sell. He was the voice of mission control that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin heard during humanity's first moon landing. When Eagle touched down, it was Duke who spoke from Houston. "Roger, tranquility, we copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot." Calm, professional, by the book. 3 years later, he got his own chance to walk where Armstrong had walked. And he returned with photographs of something impossible. When Apollo 16 splashed down on April the 27th, 1972, Duke and his crewmates were treated as heroes. Ticker tape parades, a White House visit, a world tour. Duke gave hundreds of interviews about the technical aspects of the mission, the geology, the experiments, the beauty of Earth seen from space. But about the structures, not a word. "We knew nobody would believe us," Duke explained decades later. "Or worse, they'd think we were crazy. So we kept quiet." But here's the catch. Duke wasn't the only one keeping quiet. The change began around 2015, when Duke was in his 80s. He started giving interviews that went beyond the standard Apollo story. He began describing experiences that had no place in any mission report. He talked about the light being wrong, not just different, wrong. Sunlight on the moon should be pure white, maybe slightly yellow. No atmosphere to scatter it, basic physics. But sometimes, when I looked in certain directions, I'd see colors that shouldn't be there. Blues, purples, not reflections. The light itself was colored, and it would shift. I'd look away and look back, and it would be different. He talked about sounds where there should be none. You can't hear anything on the moon. No air, no sound transmission. We knew that. But I heard things. Not through the radio, not mechanical sounds from the suit. I heard tones, frequencies, sometimes harmonic, sometimes discordant. I asked John if he heard it. He did. We both did. But we didn't report it, because it was impossible. He talked about the overwhelming sense of being watched. Every astronaut who walked on the moon will tell you the same thing if they're honest. You feel observed, not by Houston. That's different. You feel like there's attention on you, presence, awareness, not threatening, but enormous, like standing in front of something vast that's paying attention to you. And he described moments where time itself seemed to malfunction. We had strict schedules, every minute accounted for, but there were periods where I'd be working, focused on a task, and suddenly realize that according to my suit timer, 20 minutes had passed. But it felt like 2 minutes, or the reverse. A task that should take 5 minutes would feel like an hour. John experienced it too. We'd compare notes, and our subjective time didn't match the clock. Ever. For 40 years, Duke carried these experiences alone. Then, in 2017, something happened that changed everything. The reunion where they finally talked, a private gathering. Most of the surviving moonwalkers in one room. It was one of the few times the men who had walked on the moon came together outside of public events. No cameras, no reporters, no NASA officials monitoring what was said. And according to Duke, they had a conversation they had never had publicly. A conversation about what they had actually experienced. Everyone had anomalies, Duke revealed later. Different things for different missions, but nobody's experience matched what NASA told the public. The room fell quiet as these aging heroes, men who had seen things no other humans had seen, finally compared notes. Different missions, different years, different locations on the lunar surface, but the same impossible experiences, the same silence afterward. And we all knew we couldn't talk about it, Duke said. Not because NASA threatened us. They didn't. But because we knew nobody would believe us. Or worse, they'd think we were crazy. So we kept quiet. All of us. But here is the catch. Duke wasn't the only Apollo astronaut breaking his silence. Buzz Aldrin, in a 2018 interview, mentioned monoliths on Mars's moon Phobos. People should want to know what put them there, he said. Edgar Mitchell spoke for years about government knowledge of extraterrestrial intelligence before his death. Al Worden, Apollo 15's command module pilot, stated publicly that he believed humans were descendants of ancient aliens. These weren't fringe figures. These were brigadier generals, test pilots with thousands of flight hours, men who had been trusted with billion-dollar missions and performed flawlessly. And in their later years, free from NASA employment, no longer concerned with careers or reputations, they were all saying the same thing. The official story is incomplete. What they experienced in space didn't match what they were allowed to say publicly. There are things about the moon, about space, about our solar system, that the public has not been told. If this testimony from a decorated Apollo astronaut is making you question everything you thought you knew about the moon, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're just getting started. The photos NASA buried. The photographs exist. Duke knows they exist because he took them. Dozens of images documenting artificial structures on the lunar surface. Close-ups showing the texture of the blocks. Wide shots revealing the scale. Context photos proving this wasn't a trick of light or a natural formation that happened to look geometric. So where are they? Those photos were never released, Duke stated bluntly. Not to the public, not to the scientific community. I've asked NASA about them multiple times over the years. The answers he received tell their own story. Classified for technical reasons. Lost due to archival issues. Too poor quality to release. But here is the catch. Duke took those photos with the same Hasselblad camera that captured every other image from Apollo 16. The same film, the same conditions. Hundreds of other photos from that mission have been released. Only the ones showing the structures remain locked away. They were perfectly clear, Duke insisted. And they showed exactly what we saw. Artificial structures on the moon. The suppression goes deeper than photographs. Radio transcripts from Apollo missions contain gaps. Sections of the official record marked transmission interrupted or technical difficulties. But the astronauts claim they were having clear conversations during those periods. Conversations that were apparently not preserved in the public record. Several former NASA employees have corroborated in carefully vague terms that there were unusual findings from Apollo missions that were set aside for further analysis. Analysis that apparently never concluded. Findings that were apparently never discussed publicly. Duke's explanation cuts to the heart of it. I don't think it's a cover-up in the conspiracy sense. I think it's institutional paralysis. NASA doesn't know what to do with information that doesn't fit the scientific paradigm. They have data, photos, measurements, observations from multiple missions that suggest the moon is far stranger than the simple dead rock narrative. But they can't release it without fundamentally challenging what people believe about our place in the universe. He paused. So they sit on it. It's not malicious. It's cowardice. The rocks brought back from the moon have been studied extensively. They confirm the moon is ancient, geologically dead, never had an atmosphere. But Duke argues this doesn't contradict what he saw. The structures weren't made by moon natives. They were built by something that came from elsewhere. The moon's geology tells us its natural history. What we saw tells us its archaeological history. They're not contradictory. And perhaps most tellingly, Duke's descriptions match, in surprising detail, anomalies reported by other astronauts from different missions. The sense of presence, the strange light, the feeling of time distortion, the structures. If Duke were simply confabulating or seeking attention, you would expect his claims to be unique. Instead, they corroborate what others have hinted at for decades. The question that won't let us sleep. Charles Duke is 89 years old. He knows his time is limited, and he's spending what remains doing something that would have been unthinkable earlier in his life, challenging the official narrative of the Apollo program. "I'm not trying to diminish Apollo's achievements," he says. "I remain enormously proud of what we accomplished, but the story we tell about the moon is incomplete, and that incompleteness is holding us back." Why did we stop going? The official answer is budget constraints. Public interest waned. NASA shifted priorities. But Duke believes the real reason is simpler and more disturbing. The people making decisions realized the moon raised questions they couldn't answer. It was easier to stop going than to confront what was being found. "We could have continued," Duke said. "We could have built bases, sent more missions, really explored what's there. But we stopped. We stopped after Apollo 17 in 1972, and we've barely been back since. 50 years. Half a century since humans walked on the moon. And still, those photographs remain classified." Duke's final message, repeated across his recent interviews, lands like a verdict. "I walked on the moon. I saw things that are not in any official report. I'm telling you this because I believe you deserve to know. The moon is not what you've been told. Space is not what you've been told. And if we want to move forward as a species, we need to start with an honest accounting of what we've discovered." He described moments of what he called clarity during his time on the surface. "A few times, usually when I was alone, I would suddenly understand things. Not thoughts and words, just knowledge about the moon, about its history, about why we were there. Then it would fade, and I couldn't hold onto it. But in those moments, I knew. I absolutely knew. We were being allowed to be there. We were guests." He let the weight of that word hang in the silence. The moon was not empty, and it never had been. The moon is still there. Right now, tonight, you can walk outside and see it hanging in the sky. The same gray surface Charles Duke stood upon in 1972. The same ancient dust that covered those geometric blocks. The same structures, if they exist, waiting in the Descartes highlands. The evidence is there. The photos exist. The testimonies from multiple astronauts align. 12 men walked on the moon. For 50 years, they kept quiet about what they really experienced. Now one of them is talking. And what he's saying changes everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. So here is the question that won't let me sleep. If 12 men walked on the moon, and at least one of them photographed ancient artificial structures, why did we stop going? Why are those photos still classified? And what else is NASA not telling us? Drop your theory in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the secrets they're hiding in plain sight, smash that like button and subscribe. We're just scratching the surface.